No story that I have to tell about my life as a motoring journalist is as significant as the one that I'm going to share with you now. It concerns my relationship with Mitsubishi, not the car maker, not their marketing department, not even the car itself, the Pajero, sometimes called Shogun, but with their owners and drivers. And not every owner and driver of a Pajero, but very specifically South African Pajero owners. Get yourself something warm or cool to drink. It's going to be a good one. I was writing regular articles for Leisure Wheels magazine. Leisure Wheels magazine is a leisure motoring magazine published in South Africa. It's probably now been running for, I'd say at least 15 years, been around for a while. And when it came out, it certainly was a cut above the rest. Good photography. It was a good glossy magazine, and it was started by a guy called Jannie Herbst, who I got to know well. And we have fairly early on in the relationship with that publication of that magazine, I was approached to do a monthly regular column, and I gladly accepted. That's the background of this story. In 2010, my television series, 2009, my television series was planned, and I was struggling to get any motor manufacturers, to support me in any way. The only one that would every year was Toyota. And Mitsubishi said no, and Jeep said no, and they all said no. Nissan, no. I went through Land Rover, no. So all I had was Toyota. And this is frustrating because my show wasn't a Toyota show, it was a four-wheel drive show. It was called Four-Wheel Drive. Or at that time, Take a Deep Breath, 4WD Take a Deep Breath. And I did two series called Take a Deep Breath. It was really a TV title. And a friend of mine, John Rich, from the Stony Ridge Off-Road Academy in Natal. I knew John very, very well. I had shot a lot of my training videos, my 4x4 driving skills and recovery and a whole lot of things at his farm in Natal. He had a game farm there, big, lots of tracks, really, really great, and he was a great instructor. So, and we became very good friends. And he said, look, I think I can get you a Pajero. Would that suit you? And I said, yes, absolutely. You know what I'll do? Pajero is very much a family four-wheel drive. And so I would put my family in it. I would do a trip and I'd put my family in it because it's touted and marketed as a family four-wheel drive. Mitsubishi Pajero 3.2 DID, a very well-known and well-respected four-wheel drive SUV station wagon. Also, as part of the story, I decided to do a tag-along, my first ever tag-along, and it was through the dune fields of the Namib. Six days, nothing but sand. Beautiful, magnificent, sometimes very challenging sand driving. That's a difficult one. I've got a problem. It's not a problem. And I put my family in the Pajero, got a roof rack fitted, bolted stuff, packed stuff, strapped stuff onto the roof, and off we set. The engine is a 3.2 litre turbo diesel, also been around for some time. During this trip through Namibia, we are going to throw a lot at this vehicle. It's a tough test for any four-wheel drive. We'll see if the Pajero meets up to my, so far, high expectations. And as we went along, my children in the back, 3 of them, started complaining about the lack of comfort, particularly the person in the middle. My children are in the back, consisting of my 3 daughters from the right, Erin, Stephanie and Kate. I didn't understand this. I mean, we'd done so many trips together that I didn't quite understand why. Why would it suddenly be so, what's all the bobbery about? And then I noticed that the back seat was a bit too upright, so I repacked the car and tilted it back, and I still got complaints, but from the middle seat. And then I pushed on the middle seat and realized there is no middle seat in a Pajero. There is no middle seat. It's a piece of wood with some leather on it. It's not a seat. Oh. I'm sorry, you cannot call that a seat. It's not suitable for people to sit on it, therefore it's not a seat. It's a bench made to look like a seat. So anyway, well, they swapped a lot in the back, and we did this trail. It was great fun. It was demanding in terms of the four-wheel drive because we were heavy. We had 5 people in the vehicle. Yeah, 3 were kids. Fully loaded back, fully loaded roof rack with water on the rack. I think 2 jerry cans, one with water and one with fuel, if I remember correctly. And I struggled a bit with the vehicle. Now, my trouble is that when I get into a brand new vehicle that I've never driven before and immediately I'm asked to drive it off-road, it takes me a bit of time to get used to it. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, what is going to be the reaction of those South African Pajero drivers to what I'm saying now? I can promise you now, they're hovering over the let's send him a disgusting message button and the negative down button. I will get a lot of down buttons on this video. Fine, doesn't really worry me in the slightest. Any interaction is better than no interaction. So anyway, so that was the first thing. Okay, seat problem. Now the vehicle, I had to get used to this gearbox, the Tiptronic gearbox, and I found that on the gravel roads, this thing was sure-footed, it was smooth, it was nice to drive, its ride was really good on the gravel roads, and in corrugations it performed pretty well. Nothing exceptional, but pretty well, and I was quite happy with the vehicle. When we got into the sand, let my tires down and let them down some more and went down to about as low as I possibly could safely go, with the kind of tires I had on it, and struggled a bit. And struggled on the first few days. I think I was the very first vehicle to get stuck. The cold meats and salads haven't even settled, and I find myself the first one in the TI condition. I blame myself. I completely overestimated the Pajero's clearance. And one of the things that happened was there were these divots, and it's fairly straight, very gentle slope, and these big holes. Now the Pajero doesn't have good wheel travel at all. It's the worst in the world. I think a Toyota Corolla or a Mazda MX-5 has better wheel articulation than a Pajero. So when the vehicle was doing this, it was lifting wheels. The moment it would just lift a wheel and spin. It didn't have lockers. It didn't have any axle locking system at all. And in that situation, it struggled. Some of the other vehicles on the track also didn't have axle lockers. Because they had better articulation, once you get the speed right, you can just boom, woof, and just know when to put the power on. Put the power on, and you put the power on the top, and that's what you do. Every time it comes up, you put a little bit of power. Just get it through, a little bit of power. Avoid putting the power on when it's going down. And wow, I battled with the Pajero to get it through this stuff. And I got stuck first, and they were very nice about it. They said it's TI. They called it a TI. And I've got the belly caught on a mound.
Yeah, you're stuck. There's no turn.
Apart from the embarrassment of being the first one to get stuck, yes, Kusi, call it what you like, I'm stuck.
The vehicle's electronics keep beeping at me.
What's TI? Temporarily immobile. Don't, and the organisers were kind of, don't feel bad that you got stuck. And of course my challenge is that, having written all these books and everything, I was a bit of a personality. I was expected to be brilliant at it right off the bat with this vehicle that I'd never driven before, and I wasn't. And so, day after day, but by day 2, by day 3, I was starting to get used to the vehicle, okay? And I had some problems with it, and I could now make a decent judgment on whether it was me or the vehicle. And at first, there was me. Later on, I came to understand that it was the vehicle as well, and much later on, I understood the weaknesses and strengths of this vehicle. The drive through the dunes was magnificent. It is magnificent country, and those of you thinking about going to Namibia for an expedition, renting a car or going, exploring Namibia, you can only do the sand sea. This was driving basically up to Walvis Bay, right through the desert, and you have to have a guide. It's closed. It's going through parts of the Naukluft Park, which is restricted and it's protected, and you have to go with guides. And I actually agree with that, because if people were just allowed to just drive, they'd ruin it. And it was fantastic. And I had to get used to the fact that we were in a group, tag along, running at somebody else's pace, which I didn't particularly enjoy. I like being, I like just being my own man and deciding on the timetable myself. But anyway, it was really, really great fun.
Dune driving is the perfect time to show off. Kusi has found a challenging climb, so everyone gets out to watch the others make a hash of it. Or not, as the case may be.
Some of the dunes are very steep and would take typically a vehicle, most vehicles in the convoy, 2 or 3 attempts to get up. Sometimes I'd get up first time, sometimes I'd get up third time. And I remember one of the dunes trying to get up it, my daughter was filming, and I really struggled to get up this one particular dune. I really struggled. So John Rich, who was with me, he was driving a Mitsubishi Triton. He came up and I after third or fourth time, I couldn't get it up there, and he said, let me try. Fair enough. And John couldn't get it up. And John tried again and again, and he got up about 5th attempt. And he drove all the way around, and he said, okay, I figured out this. When you're at this particular point, you see that particular point there, you need to gear down. At that point, too early, and I could hear him going up. I could figure it out. Once he got up, I figured, I'd figured it out. And then he did 5 or 6 attempts in his Triton, and eventually did the same thing. You figure it out. And he got over, and I got over then first time, doing what John suggested in terms of the gearing, and got over. And some of the heaps were like, dunes were like this, and so you'd have to time it just right, and that's the great fun part about it, is you time it just, whoa, but you don't want to go because you had it. If you don't, you'll just belly, and plenty of people bellied. And sometimes I'd belly on purpose, because I wanted to film the other car. So I'd go up on a separate track. Often there were 2 or 3 options, and I'd go up and belly it, because I'd stop right at the top, climb out, grab cameras and film everybody. And then just with a little bit of digging, go down. And every time the vehicle went down, the Pajero's back bumper would scoop some sand.
Travelling days through the desert. The word that springs to mind all the time is the word adaptation. The adaptations that the animals have to make to the desert. The adaptations that the plants have to make. And this week, the adaptations that need to be made to the vehicles that traverse the desert. And of course, adaptations of the people themselves. And the question is now, is the Pajero well adapted to a desert environment?
Well, the answer is a conclusive no.
And after a day, we pulled into a campsite, and I couldn't open the back door. Back door wouldn't open. I realized that the plastic clips holding on the back bumper had all snapped.
Too much plastic, too close to the ground. The rear bumper has been pulled back, the front bumper is twisted, and the sump guard is bent. I think that says enough.
This is the first time with a test vehicle I've suffered such severe damage.
And had been scooping up sand, and the whole thing had moved up. So I had to remove it. None of the other vehicles suffered this. And what other similar vehicles? There were 2 Fortuners. One of them was standard. One of them had quite a nice suspension lift on it. One of them was stock. I could see by the Fortuner's way it was driving that it was outperforming the Pajero without the slightest difficulty. I could just see it. And there were Land Cruiser pickups. There was a Land Rover 300 TDI. He struggled, but he was tenacious in his driving, and he tried and he tried and he tried and he tried. He would always eventually manage to get up, and he was a good driver too. And he had to work that vehicle. He was underpowered for his weight, far underpowered by comparison with other vehicles, and he really struggled. Dunes are not the Defender's best terrain to show them off. Mud and hill climbs, they stand apart, but not dunes. And anyway, at the time, the back bumper was ripped off, and we had strapped it to the roof rack. One of the other people in the group called it a Tupperware princess.
From this point on, the group referred to the Pajero as the Tupperware princess.
And I latched onto this because I thought, what a great, because it was plastic that had come off. It was a great big piece of plastic. And I thought Tupperware princess was really quite clever. I think I might use that. So anyway, the trip was a success. And when I returned the vehicle, I got a letter from Mitsubishi saying that they asked me to pay for the repair of the vehicle. And I said, absolutely not. It was a press vehicle. It was not abused. And I gave an account of, apparently also amongst the damage was the sump. Now, there was one situation where I also included it in my article, where my children, somebody on the radio had said that they had seen some Gemsbok, some oryx. And they said, go Dad, go, 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 go. But they wanted to see the oryx. And I did. I put my foot down and I didn't see a yump. And one of the things that when you're driving in the dunes in the middle of the day, when the sun is very high, you get something called dune blindness. You cannot see the texture in the sand.
Never experienced this before. They call it dune blindness. And where you get a rise and then another rise after it, your eyes see no detail in the foreground.
So if you get a hump, it's invisible. It's just white glare. And I hit this thing quite hard. And in any of the vehicles that I've owned, most of the vehicles that I've tested, that would have meant nothing to the vehicle. Just oops. Okay. Not so the Pajero, because I can only think that that particular little thing that I hit quite hard, and it kicked up quite a bit of sand, so you know, and I think it was that particular thing that damaged the sump guard. It actually bent it. If that bent a sump guard, this vehicle is severely lacking in clearance, even more than I gave it credit for. And that sump guard is incredibly weak because I didn't hit it that hard. It was hard, but it wasn't that hard. It wasn't vehicle braking hard. So I got back and I was filming for my TV show, and the review I was doing two things. I was doing the trip, the tag along, and I was doing a review of the Pajero, and I was also doing an article for Leisure Wheels. And I wrote my article for Leisure Wheels, and I was doing something else. I was looking for a cover picture of my then 4x4 book. That was my guidebook, my 4x4 guidebook. And I needed a cover picture, which I got on that trip. I wrote the article. The first bit of press to go out was the article in Leisure Wheels. Well, then the soft brown stuff started to hit the fan, because I said that I was very disappointed in this family four-wheel drive because it really didn't do very well at all. The letters started arriving, and Jannie Herbst gave me a phone call and said, we've had more letters than we've ever had in the history of the magazine. By then that magazine was 10 years oldish. We've had more letters. Your article has just caused a storm. And my advertising people are complaining. And I know that they had sucked up to advertisers in a big way. And generally magazines, particularly in South Africa, I think many other countries too, they have to suck up to advertisers. That said, they printed my Mitsubishi article virtually unedited. And they had all these letters coming in. And month 2, more letters. Month 3, more letters. Month 5, more letters. During this time, this period of 1 year, I received an enormous amount of email, and I had decided soon after shooting the video that I would not put it in that year's television series. I decided I would just do the story about the tag-along run.
More exquisite landscapes, and more of the stuff the Pajero doesn't like.
And I showed shots of the Pajero being, the back bumper being, and my frustration with it, and they kept the fact that the vehicle kept on going beep, beep, beep.
Can you imagine how frustrating it is being stuck and having this car nagging you like a nagging fishwife?
The electronics on that vehicle just goes beep, and you think, what is it telling me? It's beep, beep, beep. What? There's no indication on the dashboard, you've done this, or you've done this, or you've done... It just beeps. So you think, and it drove me spare on the trip. It kept on going beep, beep. Anyway, and that was in the film. That it was very frustrating. It was, and I also put in the film that my kids hated the comfort of the back seat. Gwyn on the front said it was one of the most uncomfortable vehicles she had ever, and my family had been on a lot of trips with me in very many different types of vehicles, and she said it was one of the most uncomfortable vehicles she had ever been in. She didn't like it at all. She said it was cramped. Interesting. I didn't find the driving position particularly cramped. I thought the driving position was actually quite nice. And I said so. And I talked about its good manners on gravel roads and, the fact that it struggled a bit. But the people viewing the YouTube video nitpicked everything. They would actually say, yes, but the so-and-so vehicle took 3 attempts and then got up, and then the other vehicle only took 1 attempt. And I'd respond, it's edited. Not everything was filmed. I mean, it was that bizarre. And they came after me. The South African Pajero owners decided to declare war on Andrew St. Pierre White. The emails, Yanni would actually send me, please send this to Andrew St. Pierre White, and eventually stopped doing it. He just said, I'm not going to bother Andrew anymore. It's just becoming ridiculous. I'm not going to bother sending you all the stuff. I will reply to them and say, I will not pass this to Andrew. And because some of them were so unbelievably insulting, I got a letter in the post, unmarked. It was from Underberg and Natal. That's all I know, because I could see by the stamp. No name, threatening to do me physical harm. Not kidding. I'm not joking. And they declared war on me. And I decided at the time that I was going to do what any red-blooded journalist would do and knock them straight back at them. And I released the review next year. Episode 1, Part 1. Here's the review, chaps. This vehicle is poor. I didn't change my review. I just added the review material.
So, like the desert jackal, perfectly suited to the desert environment, the Pajero was a big disappointment. And like so many vehicles in this category, I think the Pajero's gone soft.
That the vehicle is severely lacking in clearance for this kind of thing. It is not a 5-seater, it is a 4-seater. Its gearbox's traction control, and I know you're going to start writing, Pajero owners. I know right now you're sitting there right this very second typing stuff. You can write anything you like below. But if you insult me by calling me names, challenge my argument, fine. Don't challenge me personally, because I will delete it, and not only that, I will ban you. And I've banned dozens of viewers from commenting on my channel because they were so insulting. And don't attack me personally, attack my argument. That's fine. I don't mind that. Okay, in fact, I welcome that. Okay, if you love your Pajero, great. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with how you react to people that criticize your choice. It is such a fragile ego you have that if somebody criticizes your vehicle, you can't stand it. The other thing is that in South Africa, this was very uncommon in the motoring press, particularly in magazines, and never on television. Forget it. The reason why I'd battled to get finance for my shows was this very thing. Honesty. I say it how I see it. I don't have anything against Mitsubishi or the owners. I do now, but then, I mean, it's just, it is what it is. And this is how I see it. And it's a personal opinion. And it's only an opinion. And as I said, they got very, very upset. Eventually, Yanni, and this was about a year-ish after, 6 months maybe, no, probably about 6 months after the article went out. He called me and said, we have to call it quits. Sorry, no more articles from you. I might, if you want to submit some ad hoc articles now and again, we'll consider them for publication. But, and I said, Yanni, really? Is that the way you feel? And he said, no, it's not actually. It's not actually the way I feel at all. But the magazine had at that time been bought out by Ramsey Sun & Parker, the big publishers of Getaway Magazine, and other big South African magazine publishers. And they had been bought out or were now part owned by Ramsey Sun & Parker. And he said, Precious, are too great. I'd love to keep you on. I love your work. I'll support you all the way, but I can't. And I still respect Yanni a great deal for that. But he had to do what he had to do. Let me go. And I wasn't angry with him in the slightest. It was what it was. People couldn't take the criticism. They couldn't take it. And the South African Pajero owners still, I think, hover around my videos and ready to hit the negative button, because they can't stand this negative, you know. And I now, when I receive requests to do reviews on Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, which I thought when it first came out was a very interesting vehicle, certainly a contender to the Fortuner. I asked Mitsubishi for one. No, I didn't even, you know, and they actually got somebody involved who actually accused me openly of lying about my television broadcasts. And that was basically a way that Mitsubishi used, I think, to say either he himself was an idiot or they just did not want to work with me and they had to find a reason why. You know, fair enough. They weren't going to risk me, you know, doing the same thing again. Because, well, I don't blame them. That's fair enough. But I won't do anything with Pajero because and this is the first thing I've done on Pajero since 2010, which is the year that was it 2010 or 11? It doesn't really matter. That my review of the Pajero was released. And I won't bother because, you know, so that was a turning point for me. And Gwyn would say to me, why do you do this? Why do you make things hard for yourself? And I'd say, you know, if I can't say what I'm thinking, then why am I doing this? There's no point to it. And all it is my opinion. And if people can't accept that, then they must just accept it. But these people got very, very angry and went to any length they possibly could to discredit me. And all it did was make me stronger. The story about the Pajero, because of their efforts, because of how many letters they wrote, had the opposite effect. They wanted me to, yes, they had the effect of getting me out of Leisure Wheels, but Leisure Wheels was just one of many, many medias that I was working with. And it had the opposite effect, and still has the opposite effect. I was heckled once because of it. I'd been invited by a chap running a four-wheel drive club in the Western Cape to talk at one of their functions. And I did, and I arrived. Everybody was very courteous. And this was about a year-ish after the programs were first broadcast. And I said, oh, I'm so glad the Pajero episode is over. And I heard from the back, no, it isn't. I thought, oh, you know. I said, yes, it is. And he had a go at me. And he started to rant. And his argument was, what about Paris-Dakar? And this had been the single most commonly used argument against mine. And I said to him, I said, sir, have you ever seen with your own eyes a Paris-Dakar Pajero? Have you touched one? Have you sat in one? Blank. I have. I said the only thing that it has in common with a Pajero that you buy in the shops are the brake lights. And even then, they're probably not the same. They just look it. It's made out of steel and aluminium tubing. Not one meaningful component actually comes out of a Pajero. It's just called that because it's built by the people from the same company. It didn't help, and eventually they actually sent him out. He was an English guy. I remember he was a bald Englishman and behaved terribly. And in my follow-up letter that I wrote to Leisure Wheels and they printed, I simply said that it was my opinion that the Paris-Dakar argument was absolute nonsense because it was not the same thing. It just shared some of the engineering expertise and the name. That's it. And that they should basically stop being ridiculous. It was just an opinion. This letter, printed in Leisure Wheels magazine, didn't help. And eventually Leisure Wheels printed in their readers letter column, please stop sending letters about Anderson Pierre White's Pajero article. They will not be read and they will be discarded. And that was the end of it.
If you would like to be part of what I do and help me make more videos, support me on Patreon. Click the Patreon button on the screen now.